So, welcome everyone to another episode of Future of Data newsletter podcast. So, today we have newsletter week. So, we are back again discussing what's in this week's newsletter and if Tao has sent any interesting stuff for all of us to chew. So, we'll talk about it. So, welcome on board. Hey Maria, how are you?
Good. How are you doing, Vishal?
Good. How was the week?
Yeah, it was a pretty good week.
Nice.
Pretty good week. Lots of activity, and every day it seems like there's something happening, in the big data space. So some innovation coming out, some new discoveries and so forth. So it's really great
Nice,
to see all
nice.
that stuff.
No, I think it's always interesting time. I think um, so. A lot of fun stuff happening even in Boston too. So how is the weather out there?
Well, we're in the rain.
It
We're
looks
getting
gloomy. I think
yeah.
last time it
It's
was
been
pretty sunny, pretty tempting. I think this yeah, good you are inside. So
yeah.
awesome. So let's start with our newsletter, and as I said, this is week 21. So I think on all the odd weeks, Tao sent a newsletter to our community. So this is the newsletter week. So let's and another disclaimer that because it's an online podcast, so for this particular newsletter coverage, we'll only cover the web version of newsletter. Tao is sort of designed to send each community its own newsletter. So, but and all of these newsletters are different from each other. And this one, what we talk about, is on the web version. So let's talk about it. So Maria,
hmm
how do you like the cover of the week?
Yeah, it was fed into a lot. I got to use it a lot for other conversations I was having because of the discussion of biases, and
Yes.
so this was like a little funny, a funny way to point that out.
No, I think that's very true. And to our audience, it's a Dilbert cartoon in which sort of Dilbert brings up this report, saying that there's a report from the lawyer, and Dilbert's boss says it doesn't look right, and who wrote this report? And this guy said this guy has done law from Harvard and has 20 years of experience, and still you don't feel the report is accurate. And to be very frank,
Gotcha.
to me and Maria, I think I totally agree with you. I am on the same page as you on that. I think it hits on the bias on and I think even I to a point, I think even the boss is correct. So many times you know your business, right? So
Yeah.
although having a neutral sort of perspective, it's good, but definitely many times your own intuitive inherent bias tend to influence the outcome, or sort of tend to sort of help you understand what would be the outcome. And I think the very fact that mathematical models with intuition, I think that those scores high, right? So it itself
hmm
means that sometimes it's okay that the source is very credible, but not necessarily it applies to your business. So I think,
hmm
ironically, it's although it's a cartoon, and I get the fun, the humor out of this, but it's actually very relevant. Whatever the boss concern is, that if it's not looking right, it's not looking right. So
hmm Yeah, and there have been so much that has been done through intuition and through processes that people have developed over their experience for many, many years dealing with whatever industry or whatever things that they're doing with. And not to skip around, but the podcast of the week where Abina's talking about the machine industry having that intuition to be able to have grown so far and then allowing the technology to take it further. I just found that really interesting with the same kind of pointing that, this is not something we can measure yet, and we're still trying to figure out how to measure that.
that's
But it
true.
is something that we can't totally just dismiss and be like, oh, it doesn't work, because it has got us so far.
I agree. I agree. I think well said. So let's talk about the analytics week bites. and these are blogs from analyticsweek.com. So,
Hmm.
do you have any perspective on those three?
Yeah, well, I like the first one. The first one's the looking for building machine learning solutions from a bartender, and I thought that that was really cool. I've been a bartender before, so you know, I, I liked how you wrote that, right, Michelle?
Yeah.
So you really like put down the points of focus to think through, and I really liked those points that you had. And at the end, don't forget to have fun, but it was very like detailed and
Well, it's
delineated.
funny. I think so. Maybe I was drunk then. God knows. But yeah, I think it's so the perspective was so this guy. I think he's so I saw this bartender at one of the bars there. He nailed it. I think he was just, hey, what do you want? I think you will need this, and then he was asking you questions, and then from then he's predicting what kind of alcohol would be best suited. And then actually I had a client conversation before that, and then it was primarily around sort of machine learning and sort of algorithm designing for that guy. So I thought, hey, maybe this guy is how that one of my clients should think. That it's
Hmm.
basically, it's not about like you just don't give your solution and say, hey, just chew it, but work with the problem, work with sort of the problem, and sort of build your solution in it or something, or build your solution specifically for it. And the cool thing about machine learning and AI is it could be really made to polymorphed or morphed like what you exactly want. So so I can give you really Maria's version of the solution that you want. So why not? I think that's the intent. So yeah, I think it's drunk guy blogging, maybe that's so. And
But
I
the
think
possibilities, it shows the possibilities.
yes, I agree. And I think the second one was is blueprint for becoming data driven on data
Yeah.
qual. So Jelani Harper, again, shout out to Jelani, a prolific writer, writes some good stuff. Enjoy whatever he writes every time. It's beautiful. And then I think this one talks about at length on what someone needs to do to create a data driven process. I think it's a must. Check it out, this blog. I think if you have access to this, just read it. Even if you know what you're doing, I think the way he laid it out, I think that would be of some help. Maria, what do you say?
Yeah, because I think there are things that they're outlined to be done, and then there's the way that you do them, and he really gets into like the way of doing it, how to do it, and bringing in the citizenship and the engagement
Yeah.
with the community. I love that stuff, so I really yeah, shout out
Yes,
for
good
this piece of
stuff.
work.
And how reliable is your CEM program? So Bob Hayes, again, shout out to Bob Hayes. He is
Yeah, Bob's great.
fabulous. I think I love him. He used to be our chief research officer for quite some time, and he's just the terrific guy the data science need. I think he's very methodical, very research oriented, and I think he's a big guy in customer experience. Uh, and I think CEM, customer experience management program, it's relevant for most of the businesses, and I think his job primarily is to figure out how relevant are those programs. I think when he wrote that, so a very good cheat sheet, a very good sort of blog to sort of get started and figure out if your program is good enough. And customer experience is one of the big consumer of analytics, so I think that's why it's very in zone. And even if you're not in customer experience, like employee experience, talk about, say,
Hmm.
so there are a lot of areas when you can patient experience in which you can skin this knowledge and sort of translate it over to those areas. So I think definitely a must check out. What do you say, Maria?
Yeah, he has a great perspective for what's important in the business decision and how to apply those things. So I like how he identifies them and then shows you how to apply them and
Yeah,
gives you the steps for those. So he's really great.
interesting.
Shout out to
Yes,
Bob.
yes, shout out to Bob. So
A lot of
so let's talk about the featured course. um, So statistical thinking and data analysis. So sure, I think both of these words pretty much go hand in hand in most of the scenarios. I think not always, but but most of the time. And by the way, we are talking to one of the um, chief data strategist. I think it's for the first time we'll be talking to a chief data strategist in for our podcast. I think I'm looking forward to what because we have heard about chief data science, chief data scientist, chief data officer, chief analytics officer. I've not heard about chief data strategist. So which is actually
Mm.
so. I think this is going to be a beautiful conversation. But regardless, coming back to this course, it's from MIT. MIT has a lot of interesting MOOCs, and this is one of those beautiful programs that talk about applied mathematics and applied sort of statistics, and basically linear variances and whatnot. Very easily laid out for non-statistician to just go through this program and at least get a glance of how models think from their perspective, how sort of you design a good model. This would actually
Mm-hmm.
help you understand how you can connect the statistical thinking and bring it to data science, which is anyways it has to be statistically inspired. If you so a beautiful program. What do you say, Maria?
Yeah, it doesn't matter what the silo or what the industry is that you're looking at the data science lens through. It's like this foundation of the statistics, even having just some of these courses that if you're not a statistical person, but still having some of these courses, I think builds a foundation that helps you make better decisions later. So you don't have to always well, I think the relying on the statistics is very helpful to learn that, and it's like something that can continuously you can build up, over time.
Interesting. Yes, absolutely. So let's again a must check out. So let's go to the featured read. Research design. I so qualitative, quantitative, and mixed method approach. So kudos to Tao for picking it up. I think I am like this is one of the areas that we don't talk very often. Like even in sort of my consulting sort of gigs, how someone thinks okay, so everyone gets the idea of I need to query, survey my folks, I need to understand what's going on, I need to sort of right, but there is no structured thinking on how someone could pursue that, and that's why many times you end up overdoing it or underdoing it. You end up spending more time and effort and money to get your research done, and many times you learn the hard way. And I think this is one of the areas that unless you are stuck in it, you won't realize that there is a way to do that. And I think that's why um, I think John Creswell, again a brilliant guy, laid out pretty sort of structurally how you can sort of design a research, and no pardon my French, no bullshits. It's just
Mm-hmm.
straight to the point, step by step guide that you could do, and then it's I think it's a beautiful course, whether you are whether you are doing your even studies, whether you are doing your PhD, you are creating a thesis, and you need to sort of structure your sort of laying out your research. Beautiful book to follow if you're not already following this, and if you're a entrepreneur or a business like us, do read this book. I think we did design a survey or research using this, some of the methodologies used in the book, so very relevant. What do you say, Maria?
Yeah, I was thinking about how it was how Creswell identified each of the areas and then showed um, the combination of them as well. Because when you're, like you said, a startup or you're doing a research project, anytime you're trying to answer a question, basically, you want to have a certain approach to answering the question that's efficient and that will not be so like reinventing the wheel. So some of these things on the how to he uses for like the behavioral science and the social sciences and his approach for having success in these areas, I think can be done in any question that you have, just like as far as wanting to know about a particular field or an area when you're curious. these kind of things help. And it makes me think of some of my census days when I was back in collecting, um, the census and doing the census, and how much more efficient we could be if we had considered some of the new models that we're coming out with now for data science in those early collection of data processes.
Oh, I
So
think you are actually picking a very interesting point here. So, I was consulting for a city. I couldn't name them these guys, but um, it was funny. So they did a research on, and it's a research connected in partnership with I think Booz Allen or maybe Bain Capital or like one of these guys, and they want to now do a respin of that study, and it was so hard sort of to integrate the new questions into the existing survey because the way it's designed it was not very modular in sort of in getting the insights out from the survey. So they have to pretty much let go of the entire year worth of conversation just to make the study more modular. So and they have paid like a good chunk of money in executing that research. So I think you are hitting a very interesting point with this with the Sensex, or with the survey that yeah, it's pretty critical to sort of do it right and do it sort of in a way which is like you should know what you're doing. Otherwise, this will cost you reputation. This will cost you money. This will cost you sort of a lot of things on an arm and a leg on a long run.
yeah, and it's kind of like married with the statistical tutorial that we were just looking at, because having those kind of, like I said, foundational things, you can think through the process of what you really want to achieve in the study, because you get along the way in any kind of project, really a study, a project, a product that you're making, and you find out things that you wish you knew before,
Right.
which would have
Exactly.
helped. Right?
Yes. Yes.
So
That's true. Yes. So let's talk about the next section, which is tips and tricks of the week. So data aids, not replaces judgment. I think this is so. I think I wrote this a while back. Again from I think one of the consulting days. Um, so I was one of my client actually. He asked me, Vishal, can my data sort of can I have a decision based on the data alone? I don't want to be bugged because I have 17 other things that I have to do. Can excuse me. So can you sort of
for sure.
design a system in which data itself sort of can help me just say thumbs up, thumbs down, and I think and at that point I was curious that this proposition is very tempting to let data do the decision for us, right? So you have this model. Why not sort of you can cluster some insights, you can do something, but I think I would say for as far along as possible, if you can keep a judgment on your end and basically let you could actually very well let the data decide, but at least keep it uh, let you be the person to sort of do that. I think that will be phenomenal because the judgment, so data is just to empower you so you could decide better. I think those if and again what I'm saying is have intuition, right? So intuition is the model still needs your intuition, so don't just discount the fact that because it's I think and we have heard that if you ask people what they want, they would want faster horses, right? So on that analogy, that's the data science doing judgment, right? So data science is saying, hey, I know this is people's trend. So even in my book on data driven innovation, a primer, I briefly talked about the idea of top down and bottom up innovation. So if you're asking about bottom up innovation, it's primarily understanding customer behavior. So basically, you can have like incremental innovations. Hey, introduce this service because many customers said they would love this, right? But that's not really, hey, try this flavor, maybe people will love. Like it doesn't sort of guarantee a radical change. The radical change come from maybe top to bottom, or top down. In that scenarios, you actually Apple is a great example of top down innovations they just throw things out, and pretty much it just somehow sticks or whatever, right? So that model need intuition. That is not very so from that perspective, I think this is a very relevant tip for any business, that as long as your model are using data to empower you, beautiful, but don't just go full radical ballistic on using data for decision making on its own. What do you think, Maria? What's any insights on that?
Yeah, I do. I agree with the logic that you can develop an intuition from a lot of experience, and can think of that as a machine in your own body, and then use that as a model of considering data. And this logic of how, incorporating the intuition with the data at the same time just makes it more powerful, because it has it can have the best aspects of both. So I
Yeah.
agree that the intuition is necessary to be taken into consideration.
Interesting. Yes, absolutely. So let's let's talk about the Q&A that Tao has picked. So what is the law of large numbers? What do you think about that?
Yeah, so for me, in the short version for me, I see this as, like a study that you would do over and over again, would have the same kind of results. And that's whether it's a large amount of times that you've done the study or a small amount of times. But with the law of numbers, that's pretty much what I'm getting from it. Is that right?
So basically, it's basically if you have very large sample sets, right? So if you take a lot of large sample set, pretty much like your sample mean, sample variance, like everything will turn out to be the same, because it's in the middle. Because I think many times the lower number will offset the larger numbers, and pretty much the more sort of you bring sort of your numbers into the equation, it just everything just comes down to the middle. And I think that's what this particular law is suggesting. So although and I think it's a very interesting point for statistician, right? So uh, you talk about statistical significance, right? Now this is one of the problems. So if you bring in lot of numbers, a lot of sample sets, a lot of sample numbers, then pretty much things will even out. So I think, and that's why statistical significance doesn't mean that a minimum set and beyond. It's basically a band between the minimum and the maximum that actually will generate a very close to the proximal result that you expect to see. Because many times, even some of, like, if you, so one of the example is, say, if I should I take last 2 years data or last 17 years data, right? So the data that's 17 years old represent a totally different economy for a business compared to a 2 year old. So from that perspective, although it can give me a lot more data and so a lot more predictability, and so a lot more sort of data to sort of be more predictable, but that 17 year will probably skew my current my today's ratings. So that's why it's important that statistical significance is that band which actually help me predict the current scenario. So I think that's what it's a great sort of insight for a statistician to understand the law of large numbers. If you have a lot of numbers, you are looking at probably your sample variance and mean on pretty much like staying the same. And I think one of the examples it's saying is rolling a dice. So if you roll like million times your dice, the answer probably would be 3.5. So it's like, although it may not be true for that on that particular day or something, but for a if you have like do it, it's the average. I think one thing I'm impressed, by the way, from Tao. So Tao has picked statistics, research,
Oh, can I have
data.
one question though about back to the large numbers one?
What?
that I had a question about the
Yes,
law of
yes,
large numbers.
yes.
So I was thinking about like crowdsourcing and how they did the weather crowdsourcing for NOAA, and like in Japan they're using people's cell phones and their individual, you know, what is happening with them in the weather and that spot to make the conglomeration of the new of what the weathercast is from the large individual numbers of cell phones. So do they relate to each other? The crowdsourcing and the collecting the data from the individuals and like this law of numbers.
I would think so. I would think so because I think so. One thing that actually this brings me to an interesting sort of discussion I had with uh, one of the sports analytics startup guy from Austin. So he said that Vishal, I want to build a predictable model to predict the score in a game, right? And sort of we had this fancy model, and I said, why don't you do one thing? You just go to a bar on a sports evening and give these guys kind of a like a winning ticket or something. So say maybe I'll give you $100 if you participate. Like one of you will get $100 based on, and let these guys predict the game outcome as they're seeing it with just one tap click away, right? So if you let bunch of these guys in a bar, because you have intuition too, right? Many like we have a lot of intuitive capabilities that is working during that time when we are looking at a game. We know which player meant what. We know what's their capacity. How is their season going? If we are a reasonable sort of fan of any particular sport, right? So from that perspective, and actually he found some accurate results out of that conversation. It's like you can predict with some certainty. So I'm hoping with the same case that what Noah and sort of this survey probably could hit around, I think, very close to the reality. And actually, interestingly, that reminds me, weather balloon. So this weekend was fabulous for us. So like my daughter and three of her friends, they launched a weather balloon to space.
What?
This
That's
is
so
this is
cool.
pretty slick. Like I when I was kid, I couldn't even dream that big. I think it's like
Right.
these kids are fancy. I think it's so much fun. So we like it was, and they were monitoring the weather, sort of the wind patterns, and they picked a location. We went there, and she's like 5, si-
Hmm.
it's almost getting 6. So it's funny. So it
That's awesome.
the project is successful. So I think hopefully we'll be. Uh, I'm in charge of the video, so hopefully I'll be able to produce some videos eventually. But yeah, I think that reminds me of the weather balloon.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it was fun. So yes, I think so. What I was saying, I was impressed that Tao actually picked stats course, stats
Yeah.
book, stats. It's data. It's statistic. Like it's an algorithm tip, and a statistical sort of Q&A. I think it's so it's primarily this is more sort of inclined towards. So it's not. I don't know what's going on. It's
Like it
more towards this.
matches in a way, right? Yeah.
So we'll so I think so
They
the plan
complement,
is.
like they complement each other. The way that like the way Tao has picked these things, the topics that can be
Well, yeah, I think
integrated and discuss. It's really great.
it's a beautiful continuity, at least on the web front. And I think so for our audience, so we are not supposed to touch Tau for 6 months because I think so we are monitoring all the data, and I think just to
Mhm.
let you know that whatever we are getting, we just keep getting that, and I think in 6 months we'll have some sort of. We're hoping that we get enough instances of yes that we can predict what's going on. So that will be interesting.
Yeah.
Now let's get to our right side of the newsletter. Video of the week. So
Yeah. This was such a
it's
great video.
have you watched we watched this?
Yes. So, Bina, right? Her last name, I think I butcher it a little bit, but could you say it for me?
Yes, it's Bina Amanath.
Amina. Yeah, I think she was such a great example. I mean, she's so powerful and driven, and yet she's so clear, and she's able to communicate so well, such complex things. And I think that this was such a great video. Any woman in data science, should definitely look into this, or anyone that's in like computer science, or any woman in science should watch, because I think she has a really great hold of history, and how she's able to take through what has been done in the past and the improvements that have been made, and continue to see forward into a very positive future that can
Right.
be a mesh between the technology and how we work and relate to work, and those changes that were in work. So I really appreciate her scope of vision, and how she's applied such wonderful skills, and her example is just really great. So I recommend, shout out to Bina, and I recommend that, any woman in science, and, of course, there's so many gems that can be learned from this
No, I think
podcast.
my
So, but it was a great,
yes, I think
good
I
score.
I agree with you. I think she is fabulous. She is an inspirational. She is an inspiration to many women who can code, and I think she is also involved with a lot of non-profit initiatives to promote sort of awareness on STEM, awareness on coding, awareness on, and I think very vocal, very clear. As I think you rightly pointed, very clear in her thinking, and it was a delight chatting with her about industrial analytics, right? So, what would
Mm-hmm.
industrial and manufacturing companies, because to us, so uh, GE has pledged this, that they want to be a software company. It's such a magnificent vision that GE want to
Mm-hmm.
pursue, and I think it's great to see people like Bina who are sort of championing that vision, and sort of trying to lead GE into that conversation. So I think that's fabulous. And again, as Maria, you rightly pointed out to our audience, go check this podcast out. Very interesting conversation, and very
Yeah, I
brilliant
love
in
how
the.
she talked about how vast, data science was, and how there's problems that exist yet that we still don't have solutions to, and we definitely need more people that can have a scientific method and approach to dealing with these problems. And she brought up, open source and citizen science, and how the
Hmm.
tools that are being developed, you don't have to be, a PhD scientist to attack some of these questions and these issues. There's lots of software tools that are going to be available, or that are available for folks to get involved as well. So I really, it was a really great podcast, and I was really glad to listen to it, watch it,
Interesting. Yes,
and learn
yes,
from it.
absolutely. Good.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the quote of the week. It's easy to lie with statistics, and it's hard to tell the truth without one, by Andrews Dunkels. So, what do you think?
Yeah, it's just what I think that's true. It's
I
just
know
one of those things.
it's one of those things. I think this is, too many times I think it may be the punditry. It's teasing the punditry world that we are seeing nowadays. You just throw a number and then yell whatever after that. You tend to believe what's going on. I think that's and yeah.
And it's also very relevant also with, all of the news and the amount of data, that's everywhere in the media and so forth, and just how much false information there is, and how do we figure out what is true information. And, like, all of this is important in figuring out those things. And so I've been looking at like local collaborations for more, accurate news, or different kinds of news stories, because there's a repetition that is in mainstream media. So I'm finding that, those that are in this community and in the data community, they also see the advantage and the importance of having that kind of news source, a collaborative ways of pulling together pictures or articles, or just what happened, or video, and sharing that content to the community, or to, different communities. And so I'm really glad that we have the, tools, and the resources, and the, knowledge, and the ability to, do that. And so, I think that, that's, something that we need to, continue to members of the analytics club and the volunteers that help out with that, because it does help us get more accurate information. And there are so many great ideas and individuals and folks in there that have come up with some stuff, apps and so forth, things like that, to also help with sharing the information. And so that will help us get to some more of the truths of statistics that can be offered to us.
No, I think yes. I think
Yeah.
that's a great initiative, Maria. I think thank you
Yeah,
for
I was
sharing
actually
that.
looking at an app called Everybit, because it was allowing several folks to streamline all of their content together into a one data story from several places and from several people. It's right now only available for iPhone, but I definitely see these kinds of tools that folks are getting interested in finding ways to be active in in their cities and their communities, and with the current events and things that are going on, and finding ways that they can contribute with these kind of technologies.
No,
So it's
no,
really great to be connected.
no, I think interesting, and I think when I was reading this quote, it was actually scaring the bejesus out of me. 'Cause I think what pretty much I was looking at is, and which is pretty much true. And I think you're hitting some of the core notes here that if the stats with the fake news probably is a relevant news nowadays. I think that's the problem, right? So and I was talking to actually one of the business executives probably a couple of months back, and I think the conversation was pretty much in the area of, hey, looking at the political scenes, if the businesses see the same colossal failure, right? So it would be unimaginable what will happen to a business if the prediction is totally polar from what the reality is. And pretty much the conversation actually went into the journalism school, like the typical journalism. So in a typical world, you need to have two reliable sources to be calling it a fact, right? So I think one thing that I was discussing with this gentleman was that what if you have the same sort of, the moment is something comes to you that panics you, or you think that you need to, just don't believe anything that you don't see from two reliable sources. And I think keep disqualifying a source if it fails for you once, so at least you know. So so there is excuse me. So uh, like there are a lot of ways that at least the press uses this way to quantify and qualify a lead in a news in a relevant way. So this is like, again, very critical point, scary point, and I hope you we don't have to, as a business, we don't have to got to see the darker side of this quote hitting us, because that's like
Mm-hmm.
that's going to be problematic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why it's so relevant. Like some of the things that Tao has pulled up for us to talk about with the statistics, and then the intuition and the basis of the foundation, because um, I guess these little tiny things that might be considered little or small in the course of a process to accomplish the goal end up being something that incrementally was so much of a big, causes so much of a big chasm in like reality versus, what your plan is. So these foundational things, I think that, we're inundated with certain things every day, because you're in your in your bubble environment. And so you're hearing about the same things, or your industry every day. And some of these foundational basic points, I mean, you just cannot get enough of, because they affect the micro and the macro.
Right. Yeah, I think that's very true. So very deep quote, and I think it hits
Yeah.
almost like the very core fundamentals of good data and good models. At least the good source of data.
Oh
So
yeah, and speaking of like that, standards and models and so forth, like we did have Open Data Barometer that just launched this week, and it goes through the 115 different uh, those that have open data and ranking them. So that that's something that you were talking about measuring and standards, and as more of the technology comes out and is available, we're going to need those kinds of standards and so forth. And it's been a while, and open data needs that. And so we're glad that 115 governments have trying to get together and rank. They have a measurement for them now,
Nice.
ranking through the open data barometer.
Nice. No, I
So
think that's pretty
yeah,
cool. That sounds pretty cool, actually.
yeah. It ranks them by their initiatives. So
Interesting. I think
yeah.
it's very cool. So now let's podcast of the week. So this is using analytics to build a big data workforce. I think it's from Talent Analytics CEO Greta Roberts. Very
Hmm.
inspirational. Uh, Great personality, great speaker, company doing some cutting edge stuff, and actually she's shed some light on what would you need if you need to build a big data workforce. I think this is again
Hmm.
one of the very less discussed topic that we don't talk about that often is and almost like in my consulting experience, most of the businesses actually panics on how they can recruit a good like what is really a good team, what is the definition of a good
Hmm.
team, what constitutes like what are the candidates that my team has. So this actually this is a good talk that talks about how they can use analytics to build a big data workforce, and that's actually pretty cool. What are your thoughts, Maria?
Yeah, the chemistry of a team and the combination of a team is such a sensitive, you know, recipe, for lack of a better word, I guess.
Right.
And so some of these things, being at the fast pace that we're at, and having to, really keep in step with these changes. I think that it's really important to, again, go back to the beginning and the foundations, and figuring out like what do you need to think through that whole process, and trying to get those resources very early. And the folks that you have in your team, not just the skill sets of, these are our hard skill sets, but their character and their connections and the way that they approach their work. I mean, these are all important factors that really help make that chemistry and that recipe, work smoothly enough so that we can keep in pace with, some of these changes. So I think this was such a great one. If you're
Interesting. Yes.
thinking about those same things, which a lot
Absolutely.
of.
So now to the next one, fact of the week. Within 5 years, there will be 50 billion smart connected devices in the world, and all developed to collect, analyze, and share data. That is
Yeah,
freaking scary. That's like drinking from a fire hose. I wonder what would be the future of data scientists would be in when they're dealing with
yeah,
I think I had talking about I think Bina. So in our conversation during that call during that podcast, I asked her that what will happen if imagine a sensor now going from say US to Europe, and then sensor has no respect for trade laws, right? So if
yeah,
I'm sharing the data in US and I landed up in Europe, and my gadget is not doesn't know how to comply with the local laws, right? Because it's a sensor self negotiating with their nodes and sharing data.
yeah,
So there are a lot of uncovered territories that will sort of again make at least the trade part or sort of the governance part nightmare when these sensors come into market. And if I'm
yeah,
wearing a watch and I watch and I fly from one country to the other, how will you tell my iWatch not to share data and at least comply with those local laws? So
yeah,
I'm hoping that Apple or one of the vendors or manufacturers, they take care of that situation. But these are the like how can you keep track of these laws, and if you don't have business in those countries, if at all. So I think it's a very murky line. I think that's it's scary fact, by the way. So yeah.
yeah. Well, that's why I was just like so cannot get away from thinking about how important it is that more people are, learning and trying to get close to the science as they can, because there's so many things that as the new emerging technology comes, these new problems also come, and
True.
we have to be able to solve them at a pace that can keep us up with, the technology. And so we need more folks to be able to think,
I,
and
I
so,
agree.
yeah, and so some of these, like you said, some of these facts and so forth can be a little scary, but that's the part of the brain that we have to try to keep regulated so that we can think, right? Because if we go off into panic mode, then we definitely have no chance.
Oh, I know. I think, and I agree with you. And I think if you're a data scientist, citizen data scientist, this is time to be excited about the future. I think that's so. In a way, that what's scary for business, maybe
Yeah,
this is one of the best things that has ever happened for you as an analyst or a business or data scientist, because I think it's almost like these are the Avengers of the future, because they will sort of save the world from this data deluge and help business or the world figure out insights out of this 50 billion smartphones or smart devices talking to each other. So I think it's crazy.
yeah. I mean, with these numbers, right? Even if everybody did discover something, we still have more stuff that we still need to, discover and know. So I mean, we still, everyone has an importance that they can figure out something. There's no lack of problems. I'm saying we have lots of problems that we can solve. So
That's true. I think that's why kudos to the next generation engineers and data scientists. I think they will have one of the world's
yeah,
biggest challenges to. And I think one of the things that I'm hopeful about. I think, and this is one of my previous startup around sort of. So we were designing a model to sort of crowdsource or crowd process using these devices. So like we have Python,
mhm,
right? Python has such a small footprint. If I use say Python and if I load my model and run it on all these devices to process for me, imagine now 50 billion devices processing for someone. This is like world's most sophisticated computer ever, right? This is like
mhm,
so. Will like I can even imagine what it can deliver to us. I think I'm so excited for the future. I'm hoping that we'll
yeah.
see a bunch of those things.
Yeah, and then like with your daughter, starting at 5 years old and young, starting young, that by the time they're in school, they're already coding, they're
Oh, it's
already
it's. I think it's.
familiar, they're immersed, they've got like
I think
ideas that they've been thinking about how to relate to the
I couldn't have
technology.
imagined how much powerful these kids are now because of all these channels, right? So
Yeah.
she said, "Papa." So it's funny. Like I was showing her this GoPro video of a balloon launch, and she said, "Papa, I want to do this." And she's a 5 year old. I said, "Sure, honey. Maybe in next 17 years you will do that." And I just this idea, and then she discussed with the friends and whatnot. But then she started watching these YouTube videos and after YouTube videos and after YouTube videos on how weather balloon is launched. This is like like even before I engaged with her that
Yeah.
we let's do this, she already knew what weather balloon is. She already knew how tracker works. She like these kids are so much powerful on what they can do because the
Yeah.
information is rightly available. Like in my time, I have to go to like libraries and pull out these thick books and find a small brief concept to say okay now maybe I cannot do this thing. These
Right.
guys just Google, and it's like she's 5 year old. Like I cannot fathom like even today it's above my pay grade to launch a weather balloon with the camera in space taking pictures, right? So it's like what the hell. So like
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
life
so
would be a
by the
lot more
time
fun
she
with these
gets so
guys.
curious, and then by the time she's older, like the kind of complex questions she'll be thinking about, she'll have that hunger and drive to answer them, and have that kind of concentration to be able to figure out how to get closer to the answer. So it's just, I see the next generations as being much more savvy, and having more scientists. I think about back when maybe my grandfather's generation, where they would say like, we want to be an astronaut, and then it was like changed to now as rock stars, But I think the data science rock stars are gonna, become like that kind of what I want to be when I grow up, because you can do anything from there, and you can investigate any area of interest.
Right.
So I'm so excited to see what they come up with, because they're already starting so young, and there's some, kids that they have their own YouTube channels, and they're coding and they're teaching, and they're still in high school.
So you are right, and I think I hope that it's good to see that these guys would be in, at least technology would be a great part of their upbringing, like unlike us. But I think this is fascinating. So beautiful. So that brings us to the close of the newsletter. And again, thanks, Tao. Amazing stuff. And now some actually, again, shameless plug. So if you don't want to hear, this is the right time to just close it right now and not listen to what we are selling. If we are selling anything, this is the right time. Just boot it off. Otherwise, see you in the next week. So interesting program. So analytics. Tao. So we have a staffing group in Tao called X.Tao, x.tao.ai, and we are working with top Fortune 100 companies and some of the interesting leaders in data science, provide them with the top talent in the industry, and everything that we deliver is tagged with an AI. So the idea that we understand what kind of talent you need, what kind of talent you are seeking, will be able to sort of go very targeted in your future demand, the more sort of businesses engage. So Never Analyze Alone is one such program. So we'll work with interesting businesses. We have already engaged with few businesses. So thank you so much for reaching out to us. If you have not, love to connect with you and talk about this program. Host Office Club is another sort of campaign in which we would promote a dialogue within your community. So if you're in office, you are building a data science community team, host internal talks so that you can spread the voice about data science within your group. And if you are looking for any ways, do let us know. We would love to help in any capacity to get the community going within your company, so you can learn and sort of do this fun stuff. And then X by Tao. Again, if you're looking for a job and you want to work with our staffing group to work with Fortune 100 companies, do let us know, and love to chat with you and see how we can help. With that, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in and giving us your almost 52 minutes or 53 minutes. We had a ball. And Maria, again, it's always lovely chatting with you.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle, for all of your work and making great news about technology and data science.
I know. I think it's so much fun.
I like that.
So let's catch up next week about what Tao has to say. I think it's so much fun. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Stay data driven. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I thought I was sick of home, but actually I was homesick. Never really knew that I would have to grow up so quick. I'm so uncomfortable, don't know anybody here. Just a couple dudes that I met once, that's it. And I go into the booth feeling nervous. Got butterflies in my stomach like I'm so worthless. Is the mic on? I don't know how to work this. Inside I'm breaking down, I hope I'm not up on a